India has the largest dairy market in the world, both as a producer and a consumer. In 2025, it's worth around $146 billion and touches almost every household every single day. And for decades, giants like Amul, Mother Dairy, and other regional cooperatives dominated this space. And their advantage was scale and massive distribution networks. This is a business where margins are thin, logistics are complex, and consumer loyalty is traditionally tied more to price and availability than to the brand. In such a space, very few people would expect a startup to even survive, let alone thrive. Yet in just 10 years, Country Delight carved out a 7,000 crore business by doing what legacy giants could not, turning fresh milk and daily essentials into a premium tech-driven D2C experience. They have completely redefined how products like milk, bread, eggs, and even fruits reach the modern Indian consumer. And in a way, they made a commodity feel like a differentiated product. The case study of Country Delight is about how two finance background individuals who picked an old and boring category and made it into an exciting and large brand-based business. So let's understand how they did it in this episode of Backstage with Millennials, a channel that is also part of Zerodha's 01 network. Chakradhar Gade and Nitin Kaushal met in 2007 at IIM Indore, and after working for 4 years in finance, both of them decided to do something of their own.
So when we started Country Delight, we thought 2-3 things. One, you should pick an industry where there is no issue of demand. And 2, we thought that there should be a very captive or retentive nature of the business where once you spend a certain money, the ROI is recurring forever. And that comes a little bit from the investing background and thought process. And the third thing was we wanted to invest in something that grows on its own.
Now, for two people with a finance background, starting a milk business was an unusual career choice. But it was also the business that checked all the boxes that Chakradhar just talked about. Firstly, it was a massive market, worth nearly $60 billion back in 2011. Second, it was a recurring business, which means that people buy milk almost on a daily basis, and hence repeatability is high. And the third thing that Chakradhar mentioned, that they were looking for something that grows on its own, something that appreciates in value basically. And cattle do fit that bill. Unlike, let's say, a car, cattle are something whose value increases with time, and hence it looked like something that could be scaled to become a very big business. So these were the main reasons why Chakradhar and Nitin decided to start a milk business. Now, around the same time, an FSSAI report came, which claimed that 68% of the milk sold in India was adulterated, which means it was mixed with water, detergent, starch, or even some chemicals. And even when milk wasn't, let's say, adulterated, it wasn't truly fresh. Packaged milk traveled through a long chain, from farmers to the retailers, and by the time it reached households, it could be up to 2 weeks old. So not only was the market for milk too big, but customers were also facing a very big problem, and that was regarding the freshness and purity of milk. And that's when the founders launched Country Delight with a simple promise: farm fresh milk delivered directly to homes. And unlike the other traditional players like Amul and Nandini, Country Delight's focus was not on volume, but to ensure quality and winning customers' trust. And because of this, Country Delight positioned itself as a premium brand, charging 30 to 40% more than the other options. And this was a big risk because packaged milk is something that is very price sensitive. And you would have seen this in news. Every time companies like Amul increase the price a little bit, people complain. But Country Delight was ready to take this risk because they were selling more than just the milk. They were selling certainty and the assurance that the product that you're using from morning tea to bedtime drink is actually fresh and pure. And this assurance helped the company to stay in business. Now, once the problem statement was clear for Chakradhar and Nitin, the next challenge was to come up with a business model.
We are in an industry where it is largely organized and largely unorganized. So there are very big, large organized players who have 30-40 years of history, and what your communication needs to be is to disrupt what they are communicating today and hence get people to try you where your product proves itself.
See, the biggest challenge for Country Delight in the beginning was to differentiate itself from other existing players like Amul, Mother Dairy, and Nandini. And so the founders started understanding the business model of these companies. And what they realized was that the supply chain for these traditional players was very long and fragmented. Milk often traveled 500 to 1000 kilometers, moving from farmers to collection centers to processing plants, and then on to distributors, retailers, and finally the consumer. And at times this journey took up to 2 weeks. And to survive that long journey, the milk needed heavy pasteurization, preservatives, and sometimes even milk powder. So the freshness was already lost by the time it reached to the end consumer. And Country Delighted wanted to change it. Their first goal was to reduce this 2-week time to just 24 to 36 hours. And to achieve this, they did some simple changes to this entire milk journey we just discussed. So firstly, they built their own full stack supply chain to control every touch point of this journey. And this gave them control over the quality and speed of delivery. Next, they completely removed distributors and retailers from this journey. So now the milk would first go from the farmer to a collection center, then to a processing facility, and from here it would go directly to a customer. Now this looks pretty simple, but it was insanely hard to achieve it. So the way Country Delight approached it was that they divided the city of Delhi NCR into small clusters, and then set up dedicated processing plants in these areas. And finally, they set up the quickest supply chain to source milk from farmers to these processing plants. And this helped them deliver it to the customers relatively fast. And now that the deliveries were happening much faster, the milk needed minimal treatment. So they did not need to pasteurize it or add any additives. And hence, milk was thicker and better in taste as well. Also, one more smart thing that Country Delight did here was that they promised farmers a little extra money for their milk compared to other companies. So if companies like Amul were buying milk for let's say 40 rupees per liter, Country Delight gave them 45 to 50 rupees just to ensure that farmers gave them pure milk and did not add anything from their side. And thanks to all these efforts, the end customers was getting better quality milk compared to other players. The next thing Country Delight did was something very rare in FMCG. They were able to build a negative working capital model through subscriptions, which was a huge advantage in this low margin industry. And let's understand what this means.
Typically in this nature of a business, people pay a monthly bill. They pay after 30 days on the 35th day, but you have to pay your farmer in 10 days. So getting the customer to move to a prepaid negative working capital model was the third big problem to solve for the customer.
So through prepaid subscriptions, Country Delight solved the challenge of working capital. They were now getting the money in advance, which they could use to pay the farmers on time and to the other people involved in the supply chain. Now, of course, getting people to take any subscription in India is extremely hard. But by now, Country Delight had established that trust among people. People understood that they were getting a great product here, and so they were willing to take the risk of buying their subscription as well. Now, on top of this full stack supply chain and subscription engine, Country Delight built its own proprietary tech to better manage this entire process. They started by building an app where customers could schedule their deliveries, skip or pause the subscription in case they were traveling, track payments, and even make some last-minute changes. The next tech product they built was this in-house app called Nectar, which tracked milk temperature at each stage of the supply chain. And according to a report, Country Delight used 17 different apps to integrate AI and automation to their entire supply chain and make it more efficient. And this combination of full stack supply chain plus subscription engine plus proprietary tech became Country Delight's moat. It wasn't easy to replicate this because it took years of iterations, farmer relationships, and operational discipline to get it right. By 2016, Country Delight had figured out the supply chain and the tech backbone. But now the next challenge was to grow and scale their business. The question was, how do you convince Indian families to pay 20 to 30% extra for milk? And that too when you are a young startup. I mean, the sector already had giants like Amul and Mother Dairy, who had built some level of trust already. Well, Country Delight came up with a genius strategy. Instead of asking customers to believe their claims about the freshness of the milk, they gave them tools to verify these claims themselves. They started distributing these free testing kits so families could check milk purity at home. And this worked as a word-of-mouth strategy for the brand. No other company in India was doing this at scale. Next thing Country Delight did was that it added a QR code to every packet that traced milk back to its source farms. And then they shared FSSAI lab reports, which tested milk on 75 parameters every 15 days. Also, their packaging carried this line saying founded by IIM alumni, which was a small but very powerful signal of credibility. See, in a country like India where IITs and IIMs are a status symbol, it really helped the company to establish the fact that Country Delight is a company run by smart and educated folks. And finally, the company ran these participative marketing campaigns where they would organize blind taste tests in housing societies. So basically what they would do is they would put a sample of Country Delight along with other legacy brands, and people would almost always pick Country Delight's products. And campaigns like these built a very strong emotional connection in people for this brand. And once the trust was established, the company expanded into marketing and cultural relevance. So for example, they would sign celebrities like Madhuri Dixit, Chiranjeevi and Tiska Chopra that added relatability for urban families. Next, they signed athletes like Neeraj Chopra to cater to the younger audience and make people believe that if you care about fitness, you should drink Country Delight's milk. And finally, the company also actively encouraged customers to share real experiences, which created a wave of authentic social proof. So for example, families would record themselves using testing kits, and then moms would highlight how Country Delight's milk is better than others. And this content felt far more convincing than ads because it came from real people and not paid actors. This community-led trust became a very powerful growth lever for the company. Now, once Country Delight cracked daily milk delivery, they started scaling to other products as well. See, if your delivery guy is at customers' doorsteps every morning delivering milk, he can deliver other products too. Basically, the marginal cost of adding more products was practically zero. So, the company started adding products like curd, paneer, ghee, fresh fruits and vegetables, and other daily essentials like bread, eggs, idli dosa batter, and cold pressed oils. This category expansion allowed the company to increase its revenue per user by almost 2.5 to 3x. So earlier, if they were making, let's say, 1500 rupees per month delivering milk to a customer, they were now making 4 to 5,000 rupees from the same customer just by adding all these other products. In a way, the trust that the company built with milk now transferred to other products as well. Now, till around 2021, Country Delight only allowed people to order from its app. But during the COVID, quick commerce exploded and platforms like Zepto and Blinkit became big. And instead of competing with these platforms, Country Delight joined them and listed its products on these apps. This allowed the company to tap into a new customer base that used all these quick commerce apps. Also, COVID was the time when people became conscious of their health and started using healthy products. So this was a period of rapid growth for Country Delight. Till now, in almost 6 to 7 years of their operations, the company had raised less than $10 million in funding. But as soon as COVID hit, the company raised a massive Series C of $44 million in April 2020. Then in 2022, it raised $108 million, followed by another $25 million in 2024. Thanks to all this money, the company increased its customer base 5 times during COVID. From around 300k subscribers in 2020, it increased to 1.5 million in 2024. Now, if you take a look at Country Delight's financials, you see what sustainable growth looks like. The company started with 19 crores in revenue in FY18, which jumped to 65 crores in FY19 and 175 crores in FY20. And this is when the pandemic hit, which helped the company increase its revenue to 1,380 crore rupees by FY24. Now, with that being said, another thing to note here is that Country Delight is not profitable. And this is not something bad for the company yet. See, right now there is no rush for Country Delight to do an IPO. The company is still growing at 60 to 70% per year. And so the VCs would be happy to keep putting more money into the company. And once there is a plan to do an IPO, the company can slowly focus on cutting costs and growing more sustainably. Country Delight is currently sitting at an annual revenue of 1,300 crore rupees. So another 2 to 3 years of healthy growth will take the company to 2,500 to 3,000 crores of revenue. And that's when the company can plan to list on stock markets. To me, the biggest lesson from Country Delight's journey is that you can build a massive business even in a commoditized product like milk and in a market like India where there are already big established players. All you need is to understand customers' biggest pain points, which in Country Delight's case was the quality and purity of milk. And with the help of right positioning and technology, you can crack a difficult market like milk. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you think of this case study and what's your biggest takeaway. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.